July 1969, the world stopped to watch a moment that many believed would change history forever. More than 600 million people gathered around televisions as NASA announced that Apollo 11 had successfully reached the moon. Moments later, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface and spoke words that would be remembered forever. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. For millions, the mission represented humanity at its greatest. But decades later, a disturbing question emerged. What if the world had been watching a lie? It was the middle of the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a battle that stretched far beyond weapons and armies. This battle reached the skies. Both nations wanted to prove that their technology, their science, and their way of life were superior. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy made an extraordinary promise. America would send a man to the moon and bring him safely back to Earth before the decade ended. At the time, many experts thought it was impossible. But NASA accepted the challenge. Thousands of scientists worked day and night. Billions of dollars were spent. Years of research followed. And finally, on July 16, 1969, Apollo 11 left Earth carrying 3 astronauts: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins. 4 days later, history was made. Or at least, that is what the world was told. The greatest achievement of mankind, or the greatest deception ever created. For years, very few people questioned the mission. Newspapers celebrated. Politicians celebrated, scientists celebrated, even rival nations accepted the achievement. But during the 1970s, doubts slowly began to appear. Books were published, questions were raised, and soon a conspiracy theory emerged that would become one of the most famous in history. According to believers, the moon landing never happened. Instead, they claimed the entire mission had been staged, and they believed the proof had been hidden in plain sight all along. Look closer. The first claim involved something simple: the American flag. In the Apollo footage, the flag appears to move. To conspiracy theorists, this made no sense. After all, the moon has no atmosphere, no air, no wind. If there was no wind, why did the flag appear to wave? Critics argued that this could only happen inside a studio on Earth. But supporters of the mission had a different explanation. They pointed out that the flag was attached to a horizontal rod designed to keep it extended. When astronauts planted the flag, they twisted the pole. Without air resistance, the movement continued longer than it would on Earth. According to NASA supporters, the flag was not waving because of wind. It was vibrating. But for skeptics, the explanation was not enough. If there was no wind, why did the flag move? Soon, another mystery appeared: the footprints. When people examined photographs from the mission, some noticed what they believed were differences between the boot patterns shown on the spacesuits and the footprints left behind on the lunar surface. Some conspiracy theorists argued that the patterns did not match perfectly, and that raised an uncomfortable question. If those footprints were different, who made them? NASA supporters responded by explaining that astronauts wore special overboots during lunar activities. They also argued that lighting conditions, camera angles, and the unusual behavior of lunar dust could affect how patterns appeared in photographs. But conspiracy believers remained unconvinced, and the debate continued. Did the footprints belong to someone else? Then came a mystery hidden in the darkness: the stars. Space contains billions of stars. So why were there none visible in the Apollo photographs? To skeptics, this seemed impossible. Shouldn't the stars have been everywhere? Some believed the black sky proved the mission had been filmed inside a studio. NASA supporters once again provided an answer. The lunar surface reflected extremely bright sunlight. Camera exposure settings were adjusted for the astronauts and the moon itself. Because of this, the stars were simply too faint to appear in the pictures. Photographers pointed out that the same effect can happen on Earth. But critics argued that something still felt wrong. No stars, no wind. Too many questions. Then people began studying the shadows. Many photographs appeared to show shadows pointing in different directions. To conspiracy theorists, this suggested multiple light sources, the kind commonly found inside movie studios. Some believed this was clear evidence that the moon landing had been filmed on Earth. Scientists disagreed. According to experts, perspective and uneven terrain can create strange optical effects. Parallel lines can appear to meet in the distance. Shadows can seem distorted depending on the angle of the camera. But once again, neither side convinced the other. Were studio lights hiding in plain sight? As the years passed, even more theories appeared. One focused on the Van Allen radiation belts surrounding Earth. These regions contain dangerous levels of radiation. Critics argued that astronauts passing through them should have received fatal doses. If the radiation belts were deadly, how did the crew survive? Supporters of the mission explained that Apollo 11 passed through the belts quickly and that the spacecraft provided shielding against radiation. According to scientists, the exposure remained below dangerous levels. But skeptics continued to ask questions. And then, one name changed everything. Stanley Kubrick, the legendary director behind the film 2001, A Space Odyssey. Released just 1 year before Apollo 11, the movie amazed audiences with its realistic depiction of space. Soon, conspiracy theorists began asking a shocking question. What if Stanley Kubrick had secretly filmed the moon landing? Books were written, documentaries were released, television programs discussed the theory, and millions of people around the world became fascinated by the idea. What if the moon landing was a Hollywood production? But supporters of Apollo 11 pointed to evidence of their own. The astronauts brought back hundreds of kilograms of moon rocks. Scientists around the world examined them. Independent observatories tracked the spacecraft during the mission. Even rival countries monitored Apollo 11. Special reflectors left behind on the moon are still used today by scientists to measure the distance between Earth and the lunar surface. And modern spacecraft have photographed the Apollo landing sites decades later. For supporters, these facts are overwhelming proof. For conspiracy believers, they are simply part of a much larger cover-up. Who should you believe? Perhaps the most fascinating mystery is not the moon landing itself. It is the fact that more than 50 years later, millions of people are still debating what happened. Why? Maybe people naturally question powerful institutions. Maybe extraordinary achievements invite extraordinary doubts. Or maybe some mysteries are simply too fascinating to let go. Half a century has passed. The photographs still exist. The recordings still exist. The footprints still remain. And so do the questions. Did Neil Armstrong truly become the first man to walk on another world? Or has humanity been believing a story that was never real? The answer may depend on who you trust. And perhaps that is why the Apollo 11 debate remains one of the greatest mysteries ever discussed. What do you think? Was the moon landing humanity's greatest achievement, or history's greatest deception? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to uncover more mysteries hidden within history, subscribe to Pasterex and join us for the next story.